Sorry, I disappeared. I was a little discombobulated. I forgot to bring my chumash over here. I got too many other chumashim, but I don't have the Eitz Chaim. So here we are, really at the end, the last couple of chapters of the Torah, the end of the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, the last of the 5 books of Moses. And this is the last Torah reading that is read on a Shabbat cycle of Torah readings. There is one more Torah reading after this. This Torah reading is Ha'azinu, and it begins in the Eitz Chaim Chumash on page 1185, and it's one chapter, basically. It's chapter 32 in the book of Deuteronomy, and we have a couple of more chapters that close off the book, and that's the Torah portion, Vizot HaBracha. This is the blessing, when Moses is on his deathbed giving a blessing to everybody. But that Torah reading is unique, that other one, Vizot HaBracha, because it's not read on Shabbat. It's read on Sukkot, on Shmini Atzeret Simchas Torah. And then we conclude the Torah reading, and then we immediately, without missing a beat, we go right back to Bereshit, and we begin the very beginning of Bereshit. And then, of course, the next Shabbat, we read from Bereshit, and we start moving along again through the 5 books of Moses. So in a certain way, this Torah reading, this Shabbat, is our last Shabbat Torah reading, and it is what's called the song, the great song that Moses sings literally as his swan song. So it's poetic. It's very, very elusive kind of language in Hebrew, and it's written in the Torah in a special way. It's written, let me see if I can show it to you, if I have it here. Yeah. Like, this is the way it's written in 2 columns with space in the middle. So it's not written like regular prose, but it's written a phrase, space, and a phrase. Phrase, space, and a phrase. So a lot of empty space to show that this is a poetic song. Does anybody have a particular piece of this text that they want to look at? Because if not, then I want to actually go and look at something related to this, and it's part of the very, very end of the Torah, of this Torah reading. After Moses finishes his song, God says to him, "Okay, time's up. It's time for you to die." So, and that topic is something that we've looked at other times in Torah study, but it's such a moving topic that I was thinking about revisiting it. But does somebody have anything else that they want to look at? If you've looked at over the Torah reading and something jumped out at you? Going once, twice, 3 times. That's it. Okay. So let's take a look on page 1193 in the Eitz Chaim, if you have it. It's chapter 32 in Deuteronomy, if you're looking at any kind of thing, Safaria or anything else. And it starts with verse 44. Verse 44. And if you have the Eitz Chaim, you can see the Eitz Chaim doesn't put the poem into 2 separate columns, but it gives it to you in this kind of zigzaggy set of phrases. And then you can see that that poem stops. And then verse 44 is prose. So does somebody want to volunteer to read that for us? Going once. Susan, you're going to read?
Oh, okay.
I mean, you're unmuted. I can see that you're unmuted.
I'm not sure I have the same version as you, but right, I'm unmuted.
All right,
Okay.
a couple of different versions.
Moses
Good.
came together with
Hosea. That's Joshua.
One is the reform.
You're breaking up a little bit. Go ahead. Can you try it
Do
again?
you want me to try reading?
Yes, please.
Okay. Moses came together with Hosea, son of Nun, and recited all the words of this poem in the hearing of the people. And when Moses finished reciting all these words to all Israel, he said to them, take to heart all the words with which I have warned you this day, and join them upon your children, that they may observe faithfully all the terms of this teaching. For this is not a trifle thing for you. It is your very life. Through it you shall long endure in the land which you are to occupy upon crossing the Jordan.
Keep going.
Should I keep going?
Yes, please.
Keep going. That very day, the Lord spoke to Moses. Ascend these heights of Avram to Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, facing Jericho, and view the land of Canaan, which I am giving the Israelites as their holding. You shall die on the mountain that you are about to ascend, and shall be gathered to your kin, as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his kin. For you both broke faith with me among the Israelite people at the waters of Meribah Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin by failing to uphold my sacrity among the Israelite people. You may view the land from a distance, but you shall not enter it, the land that I am giving to the Israelite people.
Great. Thank you. And that's the end of the Torah reading. So what we have here is Moses, tying up some loose ends. And then God says to Moses, okay, go up, take a look. And that's it. In the Hebrew, verse 50 is translated, we pretty much have the same translation as you shall die on the mountain. In the Hebrew, more literally, we have a very rare situation here where it's a command, it's imperative. The word is umut, which means die, right? So God is not saying, okay, and then eventually you shall die. God is saying, die, man, die, right? So give it up, give up the ghost. So it's very emphatic. It's very tough, and it again echoes the whole point about why doesn't Moses get a chance to fulfill his his whole career has been dedicated to bringing everybody over, and he doesn't, and we have this tragedy. I was thinking of sharing with you a story that expands on this, that was passed down among the Ethiopian Jews, right? The Jews, when they were living in Ethiopia, this is the way they told that story. And it was written down and translated many years ago into Hebrew, and now it's been translated into English. So with your permission, I would like to read it out a little bit. So, but I don't unfortunately have this as something to share on the screen, but I think it'll be all right. So here we go. According to the tradition of the holy Beit Israel, right? That means the house of Israel. That's the name of the Ethiopian Jewish community, as they call themselves, Beit Israel. Translated from the Gez, that's their language, to Hebrew by Jacques Feitlovich, and edited and translated and by into English by Isaac Meyer. So first, here it goes. Blessed be, and then there's this complicated word, which is their word for God. Blessed be, etc., God of Israel, God of all spirit and all flesh, Tell how the angel of death came to Moshe, the prophet, son of Amram, whose mother is Yocheved. And Michael said, Moshe went up to Mount Sinai. So there's a there's some stuff missing here. Moshe went up to Mount Sinai to petition before this special name of God. And he opened the Torah teaching to read and found within it 5 statements, and the interpretations of the matters were gone from him. So we have this kind of late situation where Moses is beginning to feel that he's losing his powers. He's trying to read from the Torah, and he's always been able to understand the Torah. Obviously, he's been instructed by God, and here he can't. He's beginning to see that something is different. Something has changed, and he is at a loss. And God, the special name, said to Moshe, I wrote these in my hand, and I know their interpretations. Know and hear what I tell you in this first matter. When robbery and famine, satiation and joy, sickness and toil and faintness come upon you, all who think in their hearts to say that there is no other Lord than me, and do not know that I judge him, or I am Lord, and my throne is high over all, I myself will bring him to the fire of Gehenna. So this is a threat by God. Whenever you experience some special experiences in the world, whether it's satiation and joy or whether it's pain and suffering, know that it's from me, and do not ignore me. And here it's second matter. One who believes in me, I will grant him a good life and great mercy.
I'll ask instead of MC for questions, because the questions will come in.
Who's asking? Who said that? And here's the third matter. One who does all sins with levity, I myself will bring him to the fire of Gehenna in weeping. Okay, another bad threat. And here's the fourth matter. When a man finds strength and does not say, oh, God is the one who gave it to me, I found it with my own power. When he comes to an end, I myself will bring him to the fire of Gehenna. So we got a lot of people going to hell here. And here it's fifth matter. When any of my creatures pray to me with all their strength of their hearts and say, oh, our God, you are the one who made heaven and earth and who made the Garden of Eden and Tartarus, I don't know what that is, and the night and the day and the sun and the moon, and believe in me and believe in my throne, which is in heaven above, I will grant them a good life and great mercies. So we have here basically punishment for evil and reward for good. And Moshe turned to God and said, oh God, I read in your book, and I there found that it said, you said to the heavens and the earth, do you believe in me or refuse? And the heavens and the earth said, we believe in you, Lord. So heavens and earth, that's the beginning of our Torah reading. It says that Moses takes heavens and earth as witnesses to God. And Moses said to God, if they would not believe in you, what would you do to the heaven and the earth? You're giving all of these threats to human beings. If you don't believe in me, I'm going to punish you. What if heaven and earth don't believe in you? And God turned to Moses and said, I would send the animal in the sea, the smallest of all, and no one knows where their place is, and no one can find them but me alone. I would send that animal to swallow everything in a moment. And not more than a grain of mustard would be left on earth as it swallows everything in a moment. So God basically says, I can make a miracle happen. The smallest creature in the sea will end up swallowing up the entire earth, and the entire earth would be brought to destruction and an end. It all depends on continuing to believe in me. Moses said to God, Lord, you swore by your name to let me know what no others but me alone and you would know. So tell me the day that you will take my life. And God said to Moshe, listen, Moshe, and I will tell you what I have never told anyone else, the day of their death. The prophets who were before you and the angels close to me, I have not told, but to you, Moshe, I will tell you. On Friday, I will take your life. So here God is telling Moses, this is exactly now when you shall die. Right? The end of our Torah reading here being put into a very specific detail. But not which Friday. So Moses would dress every Friday in burial clothes and purified himself to greet the coming of the angel of death. And it was after many days had passed and Moshe forgot the day of his death. He went up to Mount Sinai and was praying before God. The angel of death was coming and got up before Moshe. And he looked like a young Israelite man. And he said to him, "Peace be unto you, Moshe." And as he heard the voice of the angel of death, his throat tightened and his tongue stuck and his words left him and his knees trembled. And he bowed prostrate on his face and fell. Moses said to the angel of death, "Are you the one who said to me, 'Peace be unto you'? I have never heard a voice that frightened me as much as yours does." And the angel of death said to Moshe, "And you do not know me? Listen, Moshe, and I will tell you. I am the one decree that distances mothers and daughters and builds graves until the end of the world. I am Suriel, the angel of death." And Moshe said to the angel of death, "What have you come to do?" The angel of death said to Moshe, "I've come to take your life and bring it before God." And Moshe said to the angel of death, "I've sworn before you by God's name, who takes me, that you will not take my soul until the third hour of the day, so that I may go to my wife and sons." And God said to the angel of death, "Let him be until that hour comes." So he let him be until it came, and he went out to the sun's shadow. And Moshe went down from Mount Sinai to the crossroads, and one road went to his mother, and one road went to his wife, and he stood in the middle of the two roads, and he thought, "Should I go to my wife or to my mother?" And just as he was thinking this, he heard a voice from heaven cry out. What do you think the voice from heaven cried out? Who should he go to first? A toughie, huh? So according to this story, the voice from heaven says, "Go to your mother first." And he went by his mother and arrived at his mother's entrance and ordered her, "Open up for me." And his mother came and opened it for him, and she saw the form of her son. And hey, his face was sad, and his body was pale. And she said to him, "What happened to you, my son? Have your shepherds come to speak with you, or what happened, my son?" And Moshe said to his mother, "Who would call me other than God? And who would frighten me other than death?" And Moshe's mother said to him, "The one who speaks with God face to face and mouth to mouth would die?" And he said to his mother, "Yes, he will die, for all die. But come, put your leg next to your other leg and lift up your two hands and pray before God, that God may lighten the torments of death." And she did as he said, and she prayed. And he went from her and cried a great cry. And she said, "We cannot believe in the matters of this world, but we hope for what is in heaven." And it was when Moshe went by his wife, his heart was fallen and he was pale, and he did not know the way. And he arrived at the entrance, and he said to her, "It's me, Moshe, open up for me." And she came and opened up for him. And Moshe came, and she saw that his face was pale and his heart was fallen. And she said to him, "What has happened to you? What has happened to you, dear, that your heart has fallen and your body has paled? Did the camels run off or something?" Moshe said to his wife, "Who would call me other than God? And who would frighten me other than death?" And his wife said to him, "The one who speaks with God will die?" And he said to her, "Yes, he will die. Abraham died, and all the prophets died. And Moshe said to his wife, "My sons, where are they?" And his wife said to him, "They are sleeping in the bed." And Moshe said to his wife, "Bring them out to me." And she cried a great cry and went, weeping along the way, and said to them, "Come by your father before he dies, for then you will not see him again." And she awoke them from their sleep and held their hands right and left. And she said to them, "Cry for your father, because you are to be separated." And they said to her, "Where is our father?" And she took them by their father, and she said to them, "Gaze upon your father until you are sated, because you are soon to be separated." And when they saw their father, they fell on their faces and cried a great cry. And Moshe cried with them and said to them, "We are to be separated from upon the earth." And his wife said to him, "We will not return to see you again." And he took his younger son Eliezer on his right knee to bless him, and his one son Gershom the eldest on his left knee to bless him. And the younger said to his elder brother, "Now that we will be separated from our father, those who loved us will be evil to us, and those who hate us will cast us away." And as Moshe heard the words of his sons, he wept, and the heavens and the earth wept with him. And God said to Moshe, "Why are you crying? Is it because you are to leave the earth, or because you are afraid of death?" And Moshe said to God, "My father-in-law Yitro is dead, and my brother Aaron is dead. And if I die, to whom will I leave them?" And God said to Moshe, "When you were born, and your mother Yocheved put you in the basket in the Nile, did I forget you? And I shut the mouth of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and I did so that he would not speak. And I did this for you, so that Pharaoh's daughter would love you greatly and say to you, 'My son,' and you lived there for 40 years. And now get up, take your staff, and split the Red Sea." Moshe got up and split the sea, got up from the sea, and found a great rock rolled there. And God said to Moshe, "Split the rolled rock." And the rock was split. And in a cavity green with grass, he found a small worm that said, "Blessed be God, who did not forget me until this day, for I was in the depths of the sea." And God said to Moshe, "Don't you see? Just as this worm was in the depths of the sea and in a cavity in a rolled rock, did I forget it? Are you not similar, that I would forget your sons if they pray to me like this? Look, your sons will be as a remembrance. And now, kiss your sons and your wife, because those who will take your life draw near, and you will not come again." And he embraced his wife, and she cried a great cry, and also he wept with her. And Moshe was exiting his house and left his wife and sons and went, and his heart was low and his body was pale, and he did not know the way that he would go. And he found 3 handsome young men who were digging a grave. And he said to them, "Peace be upon you, and peace of God be over you." And afterwards Moshe said to them, "For whom are you digging this grave?" And those young men said to him, "For a man beloved by God, we are digging this grave." And Moshe said to them, "If for a man beloved by God you are digging it, I'm here to help you, and I will dig with you." And when they finished the grave, Moshe said to them, "Bring the one whom you are burying." And those young men said to him, for there were angels who looked like men, "We are worried that the place is too narrow for us to bury him. But the man himself is like you in body and weight and appearance. So you can go into the grave and have it measured for us, please." Moshe went into the grave and found the angel of death in the grave. And the angel of death said to Moshe, Peace be upon you, Moshe, son of Amram. And Moshe said to the angel of death, may your peace fall on your head. Moshe died, and the angels buried him. That's the story. So, anyone have any thoughts to share about this kind of midrash, this kind of reimagining? What parts of the story are embellished here? What are the parts of the story that the Ethiopian storytellers wanted to add that are missing in our story? What kinds of things are they thinking about? I invite anybody to speak up. Well, all right, Lynn, thank you.
It goes for the guts. It's like they wanted to make it as seems like they wanted to make the story bring out all of the emotions and all the humanity and all the what's going on down here. Make it I don't know, does that make it more relevant to us rather than, I mean, of course it talks about God and God's power and the angel of death, but it seems to me that it's trying to bring out the humanity in it.
Yeah. All of that personal stuff is missing in the Torah. Right? None of that is mentioned at all in the Torah. The last time we've had a mention of Moses and his wife and children explicitly is all the way back in the book of Exodus, when his father-in-law brings them back to reunite with him after they get out of Egypt. We have a little bit of a complaint that Miriam makes about him and his personal life. We're not quite sure exactly what that means. That's back in the book of Numbers. But mostly, they don't exist in the entire Torah story about Moses. And here, they come front and center, right? And the fact that his mother is still alive, of course, is a little bit of a stretch. But that's part of what makes the story as emotional as it is. Yes, it definitely goes for the get as many handkerchiefs and tissues as possible. Anybody else? Very quiet.
Rabbi Marty Huffman here. Rabbi, it seems to me that the story in the text, not in the story you read, is beautiful in its simplicity. That Moshe Rabbeinu is going to go up to the top of the mountain and he's going to see something that people have been striving for and wanting for, but he's not going to be allowed to touch it, to feel it, because of his trespasses. And that is like a wonderful, wonderful, sad story. I mean, one would have thought that, our leading rabbi, if you will, our leading teacher rather, would have fared better in the long run than this. Or I would have thought, I shouldn't say one would have, I would have thought. And it really saddens me to see, what I believe to be, this tragedy unfolding, on Moses, period, full stop.
Yeah. This is one of the perennial, tragic, sad elements of the whole story of the Torah. And you're right. I mean, the way the Torah tells it has its own beauty. But what I was trying to, add was an ancient, telling that wasn't just satisfied with that, but wanted to bring up all kinds of other pieces that were, not addressed explicitly. Let's take a look, since you bring it up. And the point is that we're not going to read this, in a Torah study situation, like I said, because of the way that we do it. But with the Torah readings, let's turn to page 1210, and we get to the very end of the Torah, chapter 34, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 34. And this is where what we read in Ha'azinu, God says, go up to the mountain and look around. Now we're going to have the actual telling of this happening. So, Susan, you have that? Chapter 34, Deuteronomy.
I have different, my page numbers are different. What chapter are you on?
Chapter 34. You hear me? Chapter 34.
I didn't hear that.
Chapter
again?
34. And that
You keep saying
34.
34?
Yes.
Deuteronomy 32, line 34?
Chapter 34. Not 32, 34.
Lo, I have, chapter 34.
Exactly.
Sorry.
If you have a time, it's on page 1210.
Okay, what verse?
Beginning. From the start.
Oh, okay. Moses, I got it. Moses went up from the steps of Moriah
Moab.
to Mount Nebo to the summit of Pisgah.
Pisgah.
Pisgah?
Pisgah.
Pisgah, opposite Jericho. Opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him the land, Gilead as far as Dan, all Nephthali, the land of Ephraim, and Manasseh, the whole land of Judah, as far as the western sea, and the Negev and the plain, the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zor. And the Lord said to him, this is the land of which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to your offspring. I will let you see it with your own eyes, but you shall not cross there.
Keep going. Yep.
So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the command of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley of the land of Moab near Beth Peor, and no one knows his burial place to this day. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were undimmed and his vigor unabated. And the Israelites bewailed Moses in the steppes of Moab for 30 days. The period of wailing and mourning for Moses came to an end. Now Joshua, son of Nun, was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands upon him. And the Israelites heeded him, doing as the Lord had commanded Moses. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord singled out face to face for the various signs and portents that the Lord sent him to display in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his couriers and his whole country, and for all the great might and awesome power that Moses displayed before all Israel.
And that's the end of the Torah. That's it. So here we have the follow through of what really happened. And we have the whole description of the land. We're sort of following Moses' eyes as he's looking around at all of the land. So we get a survey of the land of Israel. And then when it comes to where he's, buried, we have no idea, right? We don't know. And it says he buried him. And the Hebrew follows that it's God. And we were in the Ethiopian story, we remember that it's these angels that look like people. They're digging a grave. And what does Moses think they're doing? He thinks they're digging somebody else's grave. And he says, oh, let me help, because it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to dig a grave and help some other human being, even if I don't even know who they are. Doesn't matter. I want to help do that mitzvah. So the last mitzvah that he does, unknowingly, is, as we say it at every funeral, sadly, we say, chesed shelemet, an act of true loving kindness. He doesn't know that he's doing it for himself. And then they trick him, right? They trick him into going into the grave to make sure that the grave is big enough for the person that they're burying. And then once he's in the grave, that's it. There's the angel of death to take his soul away. And then we find out that all of this was God's ministering angels doing them. Do we have in the Torah story any kind of indication of Moses resisting death? Do we have any, besides the fact that it's so emotional in the Ethiopian story? What about the way that Moses, reacts? What kind of description could we get from the Torah about Moses? Right? If we contrast,
Didn't he beg at one point not to have this not happen?
Right. So earlier on in the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, Moses says that when God told him his sentence, that he wasn't going to be able to go over into the land of Israel, Va'etchanan el Hashem, I pleaded before God, please let me go into the land. So what Moses pleads it for is to go into the land, but not to continue living per se. He's not saying, give me more life, give me another year of life. We pray every year for more life, right? That's the whole time that we're in right now. But we have him begging God for the opportunity to get into the land of Israel, but that's back there. And now when it's actually really happening, when the sentence is being carried forth, there's not a murmur, right? There is no complaint. There is no bargaining in the story. In the Ethiopian story, he asked for another couple of hours. Let me go say goodbye to my family. Right? Even if I accept the fact that I have to die, I have some unfinished business to do. Right? In the Torah, the unfinished business that he does is the last Torah reading where he says goodbye to the whole Jewish people, not to his family. There's a whole way of looking at this last part of the Torah, the Vizot HaBracha. Moses gives blessings to every tribe. This is very parallel to another blessing scene at the end of somebody's life. Anybody have an idea where we have a similar situation? Yes, when?
Says the convert before Jesus is crucified, right? Was it the Last Supper or?
No, that's out of bounds. We're only looking.
Asked.
I'm saying within the 5 books of Moses. That's the rules of the game here. That's the rules of the game. So in this self-enclosed book, Jacob, on his deathbed, gives blessings to all the 12 tribes. But there's a major difference that I'm trying to get at between the Jacob story, which is the end of the book of Genesis, and the Moses blessings, which is the end of the book of Deuteronomy and the end of the 5 books altogether. The difference is very stark. Jacob is giving blessings to his family. He's saying goodbye to his family. Moses does not say goodbye to his family in the Torah. He says goodbye to his people. Right? He says goodbye to the people that he has devoted over 40 years to serving, but there's no mention, no scene here of him hugging his wife and saying goodbye, giving a blessing to his own children. That's all supplied in the Ethiopian story, right? That's the family element is restored in the Ethiopian story, but in the Torah itself, it's as if he has no family at all, right? There's no mention of that kind of connection. And we can speculate. So of course there are many midrashim that go in different directions to fill this in. But one way to look at it is this man has given his whole life over to his public career, and his family life doesn't exist anymore. Right? This has happened to too many people. Whether by choice or just somehow or other, that's the way life ends up happening. But for Moses doesn't have any close relations that he needs to say goodbye to. Yeah, Lynn.
Getting myself into thick water. I don't know when the Ethiopian story was written or began.
Yeah, we don't know.
I guess it's a question. Is the Ethiopian story more sort of the religious leaders trying to prove that Moses was just a man and that all these amazing magical things happened from God, not from Moses? And the Ethiopian story brings our emotions into it, but it also in a weird way kind of puts Moses in his place, because he is not, yes, he talked to God, but he is not going to get special treatment. And he's, that he is, that we are still to await the Messiah, that we are still to give everything to God or attribute everything.
Good point. Yeah, Fern.
So I also do not think Moses could have gone into the land of Israel, because as you said, he was leading, it was his people. And if he goes in, the land becomes, honestly, his land. It becomes the land of Moshe, where by him not going in, it becomes the land of Israel. And that to me is why he just couldn't do it. He had to die.
So two points that are very interesting, and they're connected a little bit, because Moses is such an oversized figure. He takes up so much space, and he is so special that the question of a transition is really a very difficult question to handle. So what Lynn is saying is that the tendency to deify Moses, right? Moses is the man of God, right? So the mother and the wife in the Ethiopian story go, what? You talk to God and then you're going to die? Like, it's not just justice, but it's also like, aren't you more like an angel than you are a human being? And the tradition itself says, just when the Torah says we don't know where he's buried, the tradition explains, because nobody wanted to make that burial place into a temple, into a holy shrine. We're not supposed to worship Moses. And then Fern's point is, had he continued, how would it have been possible for us to make that break? How would it have been possible for us to actually take the next step? When I was reading recently this, all of the not all of the, so many stories you have of emerging nations, let's say in Africa. You get a revolutionary leader who fights the colonialists and fights the imperialists and fights on behalf of his people, right? And then when he, and it's always a he, when he becomes the hero and the ruler, and then he never lets go, right? And then that's it. He becomes a dictator for life, and then it becomes a whole tragedy until you can finally get the person out of there, and so on. In one country after another, in Latin America a little bit also, but in Africa, really, because they really had to fight, to establish their own freedom, and these heroes then became monsters. So I want to take it even more gruesome. But what Fern is saying is, saying that how could we get another chapter in our life as a people with Moses still being there, right? So this is, the sad but very necessary, fact of life, that in order for us to go forward, Moses has to step out of the way. And that's the, besides, instead of seeing it as the punishment that God is saying, you didn't sanctify my name and so on and so forth, it's an inevitability. And it's actually a gift to the people, right? His stopping his leadership at this point is actually what allows the Jewish people to grow up, however painful that's going to be, however many mistakes they're going to make, but it allows them their freedom in a way that otherwise would have been impossible. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Yes, Lynn.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry.
Really quickly, what do you make of the fact that in the Ethiopian story, I mean, I understand that, like we talked about, the things that it's doing that are good, but in the Torah, very clearly, this whole poem about the curses and your enemies need to know that it all comes from me, not from them, and I will.
Right.
It doesn't touch on that at all. Is that just?
Well, that is true to other parts in the Torah. And in fact, in Deuteronomy, you get the curses and the blessings, and Moses is constantly warning everybody, if you're not going to be loyal to God, it's going to be very, very bad for you. So that's actually true to the spirit of the Torah's message in general. I think the way I feel about it is it goes from that kind of like abstract, very, official kind of Torah teaching, and then it really ends up becoming this very human, individual story of pain and yearning and sadness and hopes and so on. So it goes from that kind of like thunder and lightning kind of stuff, it goes into that very, special place. To me, I just have to say, and there's a little mashing up here of stories, advertisement. After Simchas Torah, everybody's invited to join for a Zoom session of post Simchas Torah celebration, and people are going to be invited to tell the Torah story in their own words, and in a certain way, that's that Ethiopian thing. And there's this whole thing. All of a sudden, Mount Sinai is back on the scene. Mount Sinai is far, far away. No, Moses goes up to Mount Sinai. They throw that in. God says, go split the Red Sea. Right? So he goes, he has to fly over to the Red Sea to go split it. The Red Sea is hundreds of miles away. Right? So there's a whole mixing together of elements from the Torah's different places. But when he splits the Red Sea, what happens? There's a rock at the bottom of the ocean. And he splits the rock, which of course is exactly what got him in trouble. And God says in the Torah story, you're not going into the land of Israel because you hit the rock and you made water come out of the rock. And I told you to talk to the rock. So shame on you, right? The whole business, right? Without going into all of those details. But there's a little bit of these kinds of things. And what does he find? He finds a little worm, like a little snail, a little worm, a little something or other. And it's been waiting for somebody to free it up forever. And God says, I didn't forget about that little worm. I am paying attention to every single creature all over the place. You think I'm going to forget about you because you're dying? I'm not going to forget about you. That's one of the things that we say in the Rosh Hashanah prayers, Zichronot. That God, you pay attention and you care about every single being, and you're not, so to speak, old forgetful. We don't understand it. Maybe it takes a longer time. That worm has been sitting there in the bottom of the ocean for God knows how long. But God knows exactly where that worm is, and when the right time is going to happen, the worm is going to be liberated. All right. So I want to wish everybody a K'tiva v'chatima tova. May we all be sealed in the book of life and health and better living for everybody in the entire world and for our community and for each other. Shana Tova. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Shana
everyone.
Tova. Thank you, Rabbi.